participated in a SurveyMonkey that went out recently via email to gather your feedback on what topics you want to hear about. So today's agenda is really gathering all of those questions, comments, concerns that came forth into some big bucket themes, I would call it. And so I've invited all of our nursing leaders and Laura, our HR leader, to address some of them because there was a lot of questions around that, but really just updates on the campus too, stuff we don't normally maybe get into in nursing town halls. So we have a little bit of a summer theme going on, that's why we're dressed like this. I hope you all are able to take just a few days off or some time with friends and family on this summer before school starts up and everything happens. So before we do that, let's start out as we always do with devotion, and I'd like to invite Chaplain Rodrigo up here, please.
So since our theme is summer, La Playa, ocean, I thought, well, what about talking about the first ocean? So let's go to Genesis. Genesis chapter 1 verses 1 and 2, and it says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was without shape and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the water deep. But the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the water." So this text shows that God created everything from nothing. But when He created, the earth was taken by water. And water, in the biblical symbology, is a very rich word. And one of the meanings for that is chaos. So you have this whole chaos. And chaos can be something very bad. So let's say that you had a very stressful day of work and you get home and everything is a whole mess. It's chaotic. And your spouse was there the whole day doing absolutely nothing. Right? We're gonna have a serious issue there. But in Genesis, God looked all that chaos and He sees potential. And then He starts creating. And it's a week-long process. And He sees that that was good. That was very, very good. So how that relates to us? Well, if you keep reading the story, you see that we were made in the image of God, men and women. So if God has all this ability to create, we also have ability to create in a lesser level, but in a meaningful level. So that is exactly what you do here as nurses. You face chaos every day. Disease, pain, and death. And then you transform all that chaos in something good. That's what you do here. So you're pushing back nature. You're pushing back malevolence. And you're standing there. And we want to say, thank you for everything that you do. For everything that you stand. Let's pray. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity to stand here and fight against chaos, Lord. Help us to always see this potential in chaos, Lord. This potential to create and bring something good from it. And we ask that in your name. Amen.
Thank you so much for that. Why don't we start with introductions so you all know who is on the panel up here. First of all, I'm Lydia Hendricks, Chief Nursing Officer. And then we'll just go down the road.
Sounds good. I'm Laura Headley. I'm the HR Director.
I'm Christy Shepard. I'm the Emergency Services Director.
Good morning, Julie Prang, Director of Nursing.
Good morning, Yolanda Lord-Cole, Director of the Medical Units.
Good morning, Carrie Ann Farrow, Director of Nursing.
Let's give it up for our panel. Okay. So, again, remember, these are questions that came from you all, hot topics you wanted to hear about. So the first hot topic has to do with turnover and retention. So Julie and Christy are going to take this one. And the question that came forth was, I see travelers, staff flex decreasing, but how is hiring and retention going? So I'm going to let Julie and Christy talk through this one.
Okay, So as you can see, the rolling 12 months, last year at this time was 37%. Our highest we ever were here at East Orlando was 50% during COVID. So 1 out of 2 nurses was leaving our institution. Today, you can see we're at 19.3. That feels so amazing. You should give it up for yourself because people are our goal is 18.7, but we're close. We're getting there. We have a lot of strategic initiatives that we're working because everybody wants to work in a team that we all know each other and we're all invested.
So this slide represents, on the left side, you see anybody clinical, basically anyone who touches a patient. On the right side is just nursing. But the first column, the blue bars say what we've hired. The orange bars are separations, and then the green bars kind of represent that net gain or loss. And so we've done fairly well. We've got a few months there where we're still in the negative, April, but coming back nicely for May and June. I can tell you that in the ER alone, during the years during COVID, we lost over 100 nurses to travel just in the ER. Slowly rebuilding, and I'm really happy to let everybody know that all of those positions are filled. We are slowly rebuilding that team. I have no slots open, but now they have to be trained, right? And a lot of those nurses are EdNIPS, what we call EdNIPS, what you probably know as CNIPS. And so, 16 to 20 weeks for them. So it's just going to take some time, but we're getting there. And as those people come off orientation is when we start to phase out the rest of the travelers and staff flex that we have.
And same for inpatient. So I work with Alina, who has a very good pulse on when everyone is coming off of orientation, and that's when we're trying to marry the contracts for our staff flex. A lot of our staff flex have actually come on to be part of our team, and we're very grateful for that as well.
Which is great news because many of them have extended multiple times and they've just become such a part of our team and our culture that they decided, you know what, I'm going to stay. And things are drying up out there in terms of travel opportunity. We know that there's stabilization happening everywhere, but really kudos to all of you and this team for getting our turnover down to where it is because of the size of our ER here at East Orlando. This campus in particular had a really deep hole to dig out of because let's face it, who could travel during COVID? ER nurses, ICU nurses had every opportunity in the world. So to be in a place where we've hired and have significant pipeline, we've partnered very aggressively with our talent acquisition team, TA team, to really, make sure they understand the needs and bring us those candidates. And then on the flip side, we're keeping them. So there's very few nurses leaving now every month. Those that are leaving are, legit family reasons. They're moving out of state. It's not the reasons we saw during COVID, which was, I can't do this anymore, burnout, and I want to go travel. And those answers are not, those reasons really are not a theme anymore. So again, really just hats off to all of you. All right, next hot topic has to do with schedules and assignments. So Carrie Ann's going to take this one. The question is, why does it sometimes feel like schedules and assignments aren't balanced? And what about floating? Carrie Ann.
Yes, that was a pretty hot topic. So we work with the leaders and they really look at the balanced schedules. At the moment, to Christy's point, while people are still coming onto the schedule obviously isn't full to capacity for each particular shift. So when we do it balanced across the board, what we find is when people like to pick up, we're noticing people like to pick up Monday through Friday, right? They don't like to pick the weekends up. So now we're trying to look if we can kind of load up that weekend more so that when people pick up in the week, it's fair and consistent across the board. As DON's on call, we also look at the whole house. I think many of us have had conversations about fairness and consistency of trying to make sure that the whole building is balanced and making sure that acuity really isn't defined by geographical location, right? We know that some of our PCU units or our ICU nurses may have more PCU patients or more medical patients in a different area. We're still going to look at those assignments to make sure they're fair, to make sure that we don't have one PCU unit with 5 patients with an assignment and then one with 3. We want to make it fair across the board for all of our team. Obviously, we can't really associate when people call out sick, so we're monitoring our sick calls, we're following our time and attendance policy to make sure it's fair for all. And then in addition to that, we want to make sure that everybody, to Lydia's point, has vacation. So how do we share those through? And of course, these coming months are very popular for people to want time off, but we're also very mindful that we want to make that fair and consistent for all team members to have time with their families too. So we do have a chain of command, so if anyone has any concerns about assignments or floating, they can certainly come and follow their leadership chain of command. We had worked very hard with floating into the emergency department, and kudos to Christy's team for really kind of listening to those concerns. We did actually address it when it was a lot of floating down there, that our staff flex that we brought in, they went to the emergency department first, so our own team did not have to float. I think that was particularly significant for a couple of units, and I think people have given me the feedback that that worked really well for them. We're all cheering that Christy is now staffed, because hopefully that means that none of the inpatient units, need to float there, but also know that across the board from Med-Surgical, in the pandemic, the Med-Surg units were so amazing, floating up to a higher acuity in care teams to look after patients, just like we're now supporting now that acuity has dropped a little bit. So really proud of this team for the teamwork that went on and is still going on. But as we said, if you have any concerns, please let us know, particularly when it comes to floating as well.
I think what's important to remember is when a schedule is made, it's a point in time with the best information that we have, and we know the world isn't perfect, right? So once you start moving into a schedule, there's all these considerations of call-outs, unexpected leaves or PDOs. What's the skill mix of our team that we have today? What's the acuity of our patients, the workload of the patients? And as Carrie Ann mentioned, a patient's acuity level or level of care is not defined by their geographic location, especially on a campus like this where we have to make best use of every bed we have because of our capacity situation, which we're going to talk about. We have to be flexible. I think that's just the name of the game. And that goes with floating. Nobody wants to ask somebody to float. We don't want to float. I remember what that feels like, but at the end of the day, the lens which we have to operate is to keep our patients safe and really make things equitable. So, no day is perfect, and there's surprises that happen, and the patients give us surprises, and maybe there's a sitter that we didn't plan on or whatever it is. But we want you to know we try very hard, and not only when we make the schedule, but constantly looking at the schedule. We have staffing huddles to really look at that, and we're tapping into some system resources. There's a system float pool that we use that's relatively new, where some nurses are willing to float to campuses, and we'll take that help as well. So every effort is made to make sure that your load is balanced, the schedules are balanced, and it's fair for everybody. And floating, it's going to happen, like I said. It's really tough when you may have even arrived to your unit and gotten your assignment, and then you're asked to float. And we know what that feels like, but just know that is not for lack of planning. That is something that happened last minute in the house that we're needing to solve for. And we hope it can become less and less as we build up our staff and our float pool. But just know, we understand and we hear you. We know that was a big hot topic on the questions.
Lydia, to that point, when it does happen last minute, it's one of two reasons. The most common is there's a last minute call out, right? That happens within 10-15 minutes of the shift happening. The other one is if we suddenly get changes in acuity. So if we suddenly get a couple of ICU missions or 2 going to 2 West, and we have to suddenly shift teams because the patient acuity has moved. And to your point, we can't predict for that, but that's the two most common reasons.
Yeah. Okay, the next, we had a few questions around our nursing models of care. Now, in previous nursing town halls, you've heard me talk about PCT ratios, you've heard me talk about introducing LPNs, you've heard me talk about DEUs, which is dedicated education units, and we've made a lot of progress in all of these areas. So I'd like to ask Yolanda to just touch on these for us.
Hi, good morning. So we want to talk about LPNs. Does anyone know where we have LPNs today? What unit? Yeah, there we go, 5Es. So, on 5Es, we have 3 LPNs. We have 1 at night and 2 during the day. And they've been here since April, and it's working out just fine. They are learning, they're working side by side with our nurses, and they're doing great. So we command the team because we want to make sure that when we bring new staff, especially LPNs, that this is all new to them. Most of them, or the majority of them, came from the nursing home. We had one that came from Puerto Rico. So it is very, very, very intuitive for us to take those nurses and really usher them into our units and really mentor them, because that's what they need. They need mentoring. They need us to be graceful with them because they don't know everything, and we are here to help them. They are here to help us, so we want to help them. And the 5Es team has done wonderful. They're here, they're happy, they're learning, and they're doing wonderful. We have 2 that started and 5 West. They just started, so we're monitoring those as well, and they will have 2 more coming on 5 West. So the LPN model is ramping, it's working well, and it also, we've seen it in the system that they are on PCU units. So if you see LPN coming on your unit, if you're a PCU, be grateful and happy because they are helping our nurses shortage.
Who's worked with LPNs before in their career? Okay, so especially those of us that are old and been around the block.
Seasons.
I mean, you know, I mean, LPNs can be rock stars on a team, honestly. And so this whole, all of these models that we're going to touch on, the reason is there's just not experienced RNs out there anymore. They are not pulling up by the busload here to East Orlando. So what do we need to do? We need to think about different care models, different ways we can deliver the best care to our patients while RNs work at the top of our license. And then we bring in other team members that can take on tasks that, with the oversight of an RN, but they can independently do those tasks. So it's a team model nursing, and it's been successful through the years, and times have just changed as we all know it, so we're back to them.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say, because in the time when I worked with LPN as a seasoned nurse, they weren't able to do a lot. Today, LPNs, they are able to push IV drugs, they are IV certified, they can start IVs. Blood, yes, they still have to have the RN start the blood and then they monitor it, but it's a complete different model. They can do a lot more than they did before.
So let's talk about DEUs, Dedicated Education Units.
So DEUs, we, East Orlando started the DEU program. Let me see, we started that in what month, Jamie? May. So we started in May, and we started with Valencia. Valencia started their first DEU here, which we were excited about. They started it on 6 West, and it went very well. These students came, and the DEU model is one that we pair the nurses, the students, with a nurse, instead of having the student go every day like we normally do when they rotate in here for their practicum or their clinicals. They assign to a specific nurse, and that's the nurse they work with every week when they come here. And that has worked very well because they get used to the nurse, they get used to the system, the nurse get used to them, and they can navigate and solve issues better because they know each other very well. So that went on, and we completed that model here, and the majority of the students, as a matter of fact, 6 of them, but 5, one of the students had to drop out because they dropped out the class completely. But 5 of them started their practicum here. So that's success. That's a big success for that 6 West team. Now we're having another cohort come in August, and they are going to be again on 6 West and then on 2 West. So we are on the PCU unit. So now we are happy. We can't wait for them to come. We are preparing. It's a whole preparedness. It's not just that these nurses come and we put them together and they're out there. We have boot camp for the nurses before those students come. We teach them different things, you know, dressing. We emphasize their dressing, their IV skills, all these things, so that when these nurses come, they can really teach them and invest in these nurses, because at the end of the day, we want these nurses to stay with us. So that's where we are right now with our DEU program.
So, and the next one is with UCF, and so we're doing it on 2 units, 2 West and 6 West, because it's 16 students coming to us, which is the largest Advent Health has ever done. DEUs is, the reason for DEUs is just as we have an RN shortage, there's a nursing instructor shortage out there. It's really sad, but some people that want to become nurses and apply to nursing school are actually rejected because there's not enough nursing instructors to hold the classes for the amount of people that are interested, and we need to fix that. So DEUs is a partnership with our schools out in the community, and we're very fortunate to have 2 big ones, Valencia and UCF, coming here, to begin to partner with them so that actually more students can experience. What it really is an extension. We are extending the school's curriculum based with real-time learning. And the beauty of it is, as Yolanda said, once these students, who remembers being a young nurse and it's kind of transition shock, right? You have school and then you come into the clinical setting, you're like, whoa, I don't know if I signed up for this. The beauty of this model is that the students ease into, with the comfort of their instructor and their one-to-one preceptor, ease into the professional RN role. And so we hope we can retain these students, and UCF's group that's coming, 16 of them are more at the senior level. And so we hope we can hire all of them. We hope they become nurse techs, and that is our pipeline. And so that's kind of the new model, and it's been widely successful. So hats off to Yolanda, our educators, and our 2 and 6 West team. I think it's here to stay. I don't think it's going away. Valencia said, I thought we were here now permanently forever the other day when I asked if they're coming back, and they said, yeah, heck yeah. So, so that's really excellent news, and it's going very well. There was another question relative to models that I'll go ahead and take. It has to do with PCTs and phlebotomy. Who remembers that conversation where we're talking about AN draws in previous ones? One thing that was a priority when I came 5 years ago, but has always been for our team, is to make sure our PCTs, which we know are our right and left hand in the nursing world, have the appropriate number of patients so that they can do what they need to do in terms of caring for patients, keeping them safe. And corporate has come up with a model that basically 1 to 10 patients per PCT is where we should plan to be. You may remember, if you've been here a few years, we had significant investment. In 2022, we invested about $2 million to hire PCTs here at East Orlando. And then this year, another $2 million so that we could take care of night shift. We couldn't do it all at once because that's a big chunk of change. But we are almost hired up in our PCTs right now to get them to the 1 to 10. The other piece of that is, we really don't want them to be pulled to go be a sitter, right? Because then the next PCT bump back up to 1 to 20 patients, let's just say. So we actually funded our sitter pool as well, because we want to be able to apply a sitter and not touch the PCTs on the floor. Now, is that perfect? No. Just like we talked about with the schedules and staffing, things happen. And sometimes we have to pull into that. That is not our desire nor our goal. And so we're continuously looking at our recs, looking at our turnover. And this is a key group we all as nurses need to pay attention to, is the turnover of our PCTs, because there are there's some hot spots in the house that we got our eye on, but in general, this is a group that we can actually grow. We can actually cross-train them. We can offer going back to school. It's kind of, you know, they can have a lighted career path with us, and it's just a group that we really want to take care of, because we're interested in not only RN turnover, but all clinical turnover, which would include our PCTs, because that's what it takes to really stabilize the team here. So from the phlebotomy perspective, we remain committed to having morning labs done by either PCD or phlebotomist. we're in budget season right now, and I'm trying to figure out what the best model is gonna be going forward, but the commitment is an RN does not need to be doing all of those morning draws every morning. And so we have phlebotomy on some units by lab currently. We're doing some cross-training with PCTs. We're gonna determine our model, but our goal is to have the house AM lab draws covered by either phlebotomy lab or a PCT, okay? So we're gonna continue on that path, because that's a lot of time. A lot of morning draws that happen in this house. It's a busy time of the shift. And so we're gonna organize more around that. I just want you to hear that that still remains a priority for us. Okay,
Patient,
I think, yes,
okay.
Yolanda wants
So-
to speak to this one.
Patient experience. We talk about patient experience a lot, and I want to remind you guys that, remember, patient experience is the perception of the care that the patient is getting here on this campus. It's not about numbers, it's not about, oh, we're always looking at numbers or patient experience. We look at it because it's the perception of the patient that's saying what kind of care they're receiving. If you look over here, you will see that in our likelihood to recommend, we have a dip right now, and in our campus composite, we had a dip as well, and that one is coming up. So what I want to say to that is please keep the course. We have processes. You have processes on your unit. Your leaders talk about this. It's on the lens board. You can see your scores on the lens board. Just keep the process, keep the course, stay the course, so that, because we did it before. We did it before. Last Stone Hall, we saw how we had made so much good progress in our patient perception of care. So we just want you to stay the course and please continue with our processes so that we can see that uptake again.
Patients have a choice, so when they rate likelihood to recommend, they're telling their friends and families about the experience, and so competition is popping up everywhere, and we want to make sure everybody has the best experience they can at Advent Health, honestly, any facility that we have. All right, next question. Several questions around, please, can you give us an update on the wage market analysis process? How often does it happen? And where are we? And so Laura will take this one and kind of kick us off there.
So one thing to share with you all is that previously last year, it was decided that there would be 4 market analyses done throughout the year. However, over the course of last year, as they did that, they determined, one, the amount of in-depth research that the compensation team is having to do for each position, and the fact that the external resources that we use to help benchmark our compensation rates are not updated as frequently as we were doing market analysis. So that is actually changing this year, and there will only be 2 market analysis done in 2023 and moving forward. Another piece of that too to understand is that the compensation that does this, they are looking at not just our hospital and not just our region, but they're also looking at all of the different regions within Advent Health when they are starting to do the benchmarking process for compensation. So this is how Advent Health compensation goes through the competitive pay process to do the market analysis. So first, they're collecting all of the data for the individual job codes, the job descriptions, the pay ranges. They're verifying whether or not those job descriptions are similar to other job descriptions. They are always working on trying to eliminate the number of job descriptions that we have, because if we have similar job descriptions, it makes it so much easier on their end and our end really to be able to streamline that so there's just one job description utilized across different facilities. So that's the first piece of it. Second piece of it is that they are then looking to see internally what do our benchmarks look like from a compensation practice. And then step 3 is then when we're looking externally. So we're looking at our local market. We're utilizing the Bureau of Labor Statistics to get a lot of our data, but there's also a couple of other external resources that we use to make sure, are we being competitive and are we being fair with our compensation? Go to the next slide. So each position will continue to be reviewed at Advent Health, and they'll be reviewed twice a year. The spring market adjustments have been completed, so those were just completed recently. The areas that were impacted during that were some of our emergency medical services, our imaging and cath lab, EKG roles. Those are the main ones impacted. Compensation has already begun. The second review, like I mentioned, it's a very long process for them to go through each and every one of those job codes. They have already begun that, and we anticipate knowing what positions are going to be impacted by that around November, similar to last year.
It's a little out of place.
Yeah.
But anyway,
But I can talk about it.
Really quick before we, okay, well, this goes back to the hiring. We're gonna replace this for the future ones, but basically, we meet constantly with talent acquisition by unit, by ICU, by level of care, by department, by everything, to make sure that we stay on track with what we call the labor demand model. So before every year, we project what our hiring needs are going to be in every category, every unit. Your leaders are all a part of that. And it's as good as we retain our nurses, but assuming that we continue to see the stabilization, it gives us a trajectory of how many hires we need by month, by class, by shift even. And so this just is a graphic of that. We review this constantly, your leaders and myself, but it basically, wherever you see a plus is good. Like the ED, as Christy mentioned, first time in a long, long time, we've been ahead of the game, and you could see a +6 there. And so basically we just keep a running tally every month to know, well, all right, if we didn't hit it in July, what do we need to do in August to make sure we stay on that track so that we're hiring as we need to be. Back to the wage, sorry about the out of order here. Just remember during the pandemic, it was a volatile market. It was changing daily, it felt like, around the country. And so the quarterly reviews had to be done just to keep pace with the market as a whole. And so as we've started to see some stabilization, it doesn't mean they stop. As Laura said, it's a very in-depth process, and so it's going to happen. And everybody's looked at, guys, everybody, RN down to EBS, every class to see, are we competitive? EBS, for example, you know, we're competing with hotels. We're competing with Disney. It's a different market depending on the job class and the role and all. So just know that that continues to be looked at, you know, and to make sure that we stay competitive out there. So, okay, I'm sensitive to time here. So this, okay, workplace violence. You've heard me talk about this in previous town halls. You've probably heard about the corporate policy that came down. That's basically a zero tolerance for workplace violence. So I want to ask Christy and Laura to briefly touch on this and what we're doing here at East Orlando specifically around workplace violence.
Okay, I'm really excited about this one because it's very much needed at East Orlando. Lydia formed, I think, 3 or 4 months ago, the Workplace Violence Committee, which Laura and Aaron, the ER manager, are co-chairs of. With that, we are working on forming a BERT team, which is a behavioral emergency response team. A team of people that can respond to a patient who's escalating, and they'll be specialized, and so that they can help to hopefully de-escalate that patient instead of having it get into actual violence. In addition, we're looking at psych sitters because they are specially trained and they can help with that de-escalation process as well. We're looking to start this in the ED to kind of fine tune it for you guys and then have it kind of spread out to the rest of the house. What we can ask you is keep reporting. We are the best campus for reporting right now, and we want to stay that way because they added this category in the origami system, and prior to that, we really had no way of knowing exactly how much it was happening. So now, thankfully, we have that capability, so please keep reporting.
You want to add anything? No, I think that what you've shared is great. The work that we're doing, we are connecting with other facilities to see what they've done there as well. But I think the psych sitters is going to be very helpful just because they do have that de-escalation training and will be able to help things from getting to the point where a workplace violence incident occurs. And then she mentioned it already, but just keep reporting. We want to make sure that we have really good data when it comes to what are the themes and trends in our facility, because then that helps us tailor our response to it. So apart from the BERT team, also training that we can do for team members as well.
We know we've got some challenging patients out there. You guys see it every day, and you're in the thick of it, and so we really want you to feel supported and be safe, and the patients stay safe as well. So think about how we call rapid today for a patient that's clinically declining. Imagine if you're with a patient who's escalating in behaviors, or anybody for that matter, a family member, whatever it may be. You will have the ability to activate a BERT team, just like the rapid response team, so that the right people and expertise will come, be at your side, and you know, every situation could be a different person. In one, it may be the chaplain that's most helpful, maybe it's security in another, or maybe it's just somebody who's got some extra training in de-escalation. It depends. So just know we continue to work that, but that also takes an investment of not only time and pulling it all together and organizing it, but psych techs and all of that. So know that I'm taking that as we prepare for next year's budget. But that's, I think, going to be huge for this campus because we do serve a challenging population. All right. I'm going to just briefly touch on capacity challenges because there were several comments. We don't have enough room. We have semi-privates. We need more beds. Yes, yes, and yes. So there is a whole process that goes into when you need to expand a hospital or build a new facility, a new hospital. It's called strategic capital. Capital is money that the company reinvests strategically to new equipment, new facilities, new buildings, whatever it may be. We are on the list, and we hope to gain approval to expand here at East Orlando. And what that would look like, the plans right now, which we have worked with architects, is to build on top of our West Tower. So we would now have 7, 8, 9, and 10, floors 7 through 10. So 4 floors on top of the tower, okay? So that needs to go through process. You know, imagine if you're a president, Terry Shaw, in his seat, and everybody needs to build something and wants something and all this. He strategically has to sit there with his cabinet and figure out what makes the most sense for the company, what makes the most sense for our communities, where's there the most pressing need. So the beauty of it, Advent Health is growing. The challenge of it is everybody's in the strategic capital race to pitch their case. But just know the C-suite, myself, we're doing that work and we'll keep you posted as where that goes. Even before that comes, work needs to happen in what I call the guts of our hospital, our procedural areas, SPD, sterile processing. Some of our spaces, we know it, East Tower and first floor is old and small and not efficient. And before we even build a tower, we would have to take care of some infrastructure down to things like the generators, the power plant, and parking garage, and there's a lot that comes with it. So just know we continue on that. You probably have heard we are building a hospital in Lake Nona. They're breaking ground in the near future, and so that will be a significant add to Advent Health. So, you know, I think that it's important, we just understand that we need to be good stewards of the work that we do in terms of length of stay, throughput, managing our resources, labor productivity, because all of that goes into this strategic capital. It earns us money. It earns us money when we perform and are good stewards, and we can therefore have the resources we need to allocate. So I can't go into a lot more depth there, but just know you'll hear from us or your leaders as the process unfolds. It's right now actually happening, and over the next several months there's further discussions there. So I wanted to hit on this one, definitely. There's a question around the new PDO to PTO policy and also the family leave benefit, so I've asked Laura to speak to that one.
Absolutely. All right, move to the next slide. So the PDO to PTO transition, we've gotten a lot of questions about, so I just kind of wanted to run through the differences between the two, what's changing, what's not changing. So firstly, what's not changing, of course, is who's eligible to accrue time off. All of our full-time and benefits eligible part-time team members will continue to be able to accrue time off, and the rate at which they're accruing time off will continue to be the same. The cash out at 90% will be the same while they're employed, the time off request process, and then of course, the standard hours true up. So if you don't meet your full hours in a week, it'll true up from the PTO. That will continue to stay. What's changing? So the new PTO bank is going to be accruing your time in hours versus dollars. And where you're gonna see the biggest impact with this change is, say you got a promotion or a raise. The previous way with us accruing in dollars, you'd have maybe $100 in your bank, right? And so you go from making $10 an hour to $20 an hour. That $100 doesn't then stretch as far as it used to when you were making $10 an hour, now that you're making 20. That's changing. So now it's going to be accruing in time. So if you have 10 hours of PTO in your bank, it doesn't matter if you're now making more money than you used to when you accrued that. That 10 hours stays as 10 hours. So you're essentially getting more when you get promoted or you get a raise. So it's a very good benefit. It makes it so much easier when you're trying to figure out, okay, how much PTO do I have? How much can I take so that I'll have what I need left over? It makes that process a lot simpler. So the current PTO bank that you have is going to be converted to a legacy PTO bank, which will allow for 100% cash out at separation. It will be available for PTO donation. That's new for our region, that you'll be able to donate PTO to other people if you'd like to help out. And then also, if your new PTO bank doesn't have enough hours to cover the PTO you'd like to take off, you can actually pull from that legacy bank to cover that time too. We are in a freeze at the moment. It's an administrative period as they go through the process of making sure that the transition goes smoothly. So no cash out can happen right now, but you'll be able to start cashing out from the new PTO bank on August 27th. Paid parental leave is another really awesome benefit that just started actually as of yesterday. So this is 4 weeks paid parental leave for full-time benefits eligible team members for the birth of a child or the adoption of a child. It's paid at 100% of your base compensation rate. And then it's integrated with short-term disability and concurrent with FMLA. So if you have short-term disability, you'll have that first 2 weeks where it's going to pull PTO. That's the probationary period is kind of what they call it. And then your short-term disability will start after the second week. That usually is about 4 to 6 weeks. It just depends on how the labor went, all of that, what your doctor says you need. And then after that, that's when the 4 weeks of paid parental leave is going to kick in during the rest of your FMLA. It is effective as of yesterday. It is not retroactive, but new team members will be immediately eligible. So it's also a really good TA strategy for us being able to attract team members.
And really, the PTO especially, PTO is really an industry standard. Most places have PTO, not PDO. Actually, it was kind of clunky to try to explain to new hires that aren't familiar with it. And the parental leave, I think, is awesome. That came directly from feedback from team members,
Yes.
Surveys that have been done, and so that's super exciting to see. Okay, we're running short on time, but I do want to spend a moment basically to talk about that some of the questions are like, why are we rushing patients through? It feels like we're rushing patients through, or rushing to discharge them. How come we're pulling the full in the ED? Why all this stuff about length of stay? So I asked Julie and Christy to just basically touch on that for us.
So you can see our run chart for the year for length of stay. We continually come down. We've actually taken about a half a day off of our length of stay over the last year. But what I'd like to talk to you guys about is length of stay actually incorporates all of the metrics up here. The most important things to our patients is getting a bed and then going home. Those are the two things. When we go and round on patients, what do they say? Most important thing, I want to go home. They want to go home to their animals, their families, anniversaries. So, sorry, had a a senior moment. What do we?
A
Seasoned moment. So many things going through my head. So not only from a patient experience, a clinical aspect, the longer they stay, the more infections they get, or they could get an infection, but also our partners in the emergency room. So when we come on in the morning, our beds are full. That's when Christy's unit is ramping up. So we are desperately trying to get our patients out sooner. So if you see the next slide, you can see these are discharges before noon. So October, we were at about 6%. Now we're around 13%. That is huge when it comes to our emergency room, because by the time they're starting not to have any more beds, we have some to bring the patients in. And nobody wants to wait in our emergency room, as wonderful as you are, for 2 days on a stretcher. We all know what it's like to receive a patient that's been in the emergency room for quite a long time, in the hallway. They're not happy, and we wouldn't be happy either. So that's the whole goal behind length of stay.
And just to add to that, so we have, as you guys, when we come on and your beds are full, and then we start to ramp up, so every time then from 7 a.m. to 2 to 3, because most of the inpatient discharges unfortunately happen after around 3 and beyond. So as there's no beds, we're constantly, the docs are putting in admission orders all day long, and there's no beds available, which is why sometimes to you guys it probably feels like, wow, they're just dumping right now, right? But we've been putting those orders in all day long, and then all of a sudden now there's beds available, and that's when mission control starts to assign. So there's a process. I want you to know that it's not intentional, it's just there aren't beds available as we start to get busier. One of the other things I was asked to talk about is pull till full. I don't think there's any ED folks in here, so we don't need to spend a lot of time there, but it's, we have probably from the 1 o'clock on range, anywhere from 20 to 40 people checking in per hour, which is why that throughput and this length of stay is so important, and these discharges before noon, kudos. This is amazing, amazing work, so thank you, everyone.
And to Julie's point, this really touches every metric. It's certainly about patient experience. It's certainly about progression of care and keeping our patients safe and clinically sound and getting them the care. It's about financial metrics as well. It just is every metric. And so, but really what it's about behind every metric is a patient, right? So none of us, as I said, want to be on a stretcher, in our ED, in a hallway, for hours and hours, waiting to get going on their care because they just want to be home. That's really what it's about. Okay, to wrap it up, we have spent every town hall focused on topics like burnout, well-being, mental health. Nikki has been to several of our town halls, and we just wanted to continue to say this is still and will remain a priority for us, because just because the pandemic is behind us, it's behind us, but we're all, as a healthcare system and people, I think, still recovering from that in many, many ways. Not to mention just the nursing's tough. It's tough. And so we want you to feel taken care of.
Yeah, so just to touch on it, we have 4 units that are doing a pilot, which you'll probably hear the word tips, but really it's about peer support. And so the ICU, the ED, 5 West and 6 East are going to be our pilot units. So if any of our peer supporters are here today, thank you so much for being there and doing that. And that is to allow our team members to have peers that can go to if they're having any moment where they're like, I just need someone to talk to, I need someone to help me navigate what I'm feeling. That could be something to do with home, that could be something to do with work, that could be something that gets triggered for what we've all been through the pandemic. So really excited to see those results. Thank you everyone who took part in the work environment survey, which is going to give us some great data to start that project. Obviously we still have Nikki here. I'm sure you see our wellbeing teams all the time offering out tidbits and things for you guys to kind of make your days easier. And I think Lydia, when after this, we're actually got some other sessions planned for you guys, which I think the details will come out in the email after here, so we can continue to provide that service to you guys and for all of us. I mean, all of us have that need and opportunity to be able to continue to look after ourselves, because if we don't look after ourselves, then we can't really extend our way to look after our patients.
Okay, we ran a little bit over, sorry. Tried to hit on all of the main topics that came through from the questions, the surveys, and we'll continue this. We want you all to build the agenda so that information you receive at these town halls specific to nursing is valuable to you. So we all just want to thank you. I hope this format was a little bit different. So I'm not up here the whole time and all you hear is me because you've got your amazing leaders. And so if there's any questions about anything we touched on today, or you personally have some questions or concerns, as always, go to your nurse manager, go to your director, Laura, myself, we're open door. So thank you so much for coming today. Appreciate you all, and hopefully we can have some fun as the summer kind of winds down quicker than we'd like, I think. So thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate it.